Russian President Vladimir Putin thought that he was safe. He could sequester himself away in one of his many presidential palaces or underground bunkers to deliver orders for his Ukraine invasion. His troops die in droves, but their leader gets to hide away, never coming under threat from Ukraine's drones, bombs, or missiles. At least that's what Putin thought. But we've just learned that Putin was almost killed just a few short days ago. Ukraine's assassination drones are getting closer than ever to Russia's president, and the incident has led to some serious blowback and questions being raised about what happens when Putin is gone. On May 26th, the New York Post was among the first outlets to report on what nearly happened to Putin. According to Yuri Dashkin, who is the commander of a Russian air defense division, Putin came under fire from Ukraine's drones while he was making a tour of duty in Kursk. That is the Russian oblast that Ukraine counter-invaded back in August 2024. For months, Russian forces, alongside North Korean soldiers, fought to repel those Ukrainian invaders from Kursk. By the end of April, Russia claimed it had succeeded. There were no more Ukrainians in Kursk. And Putin was in the mood to celebrate. Putin took a helicopter into the region to celebrate his soldiers' collective success. That chopper ride was almost his last, with Dashkin claiming that Russia's president found himself virtually at the epicenter of repelling a large-scale attack by the enemy drones. It's unknown if these drones were sent specifically to target Putin, or if Ukraine was simply launching another attack on Kursk. Regardless, Dashkin claims that Putin managed to escape without any major incident. Therefore, we simultaneously conducted an air defense battle and ensured the safety of the presidential helicopter's flight in the air, Dashkin says. It's worth noting that nobody has been able to verify that the claimed attack even took place independently. The only person who's saying it did so far is one Russian air defense commander. There's no word from Putin. No independent fact-checkers have been able to verify the assault, and perhaps most importantly of all, Ukraine has come out to claim that the attack never happened. Instead, it says Putin is using his mouthpieces in a vain attempt to cast himself as some sort of heroic figure, at a time when Russia is struggling to mount any serious offense against Ukraine in his invasion. At least that's according to Ukraine's Stratcom Center, which the Warzone reports as calling the news of the attack on Putin's helicopter a lie. The center goes further in a post on its Facebook page saying, pro-Kremlin media covering Putin's trip claimed that he moved through the region exclusively by car. Immediately, that would rubbish any claims that a chopper carrying Russia's president was attacked. Putin was never in a chopper, says the Stratcom Center. So that couldn't have happened. The post continues, footage of the motorcade was shown on all federal channels. In addition, neither the Ministry of Defense nor the Russian media and Telegram channels reported the attack of the UAV, which on scale would match the words of Dashkin. Instead, as claimed by one Ukrainian Telegram channel, the reports of the attack could have been pulled out of thin air to make Putin seem braver than he really is. It's possible that all this is a lie to create a heroic halo, says the Kaplienko Ukraine Fights Telegram channel. It's all very confusing. What we know for sure is that Putin certainly did visit Kursk. He was there on May 20th to check out the oblast's new nuclear power plant and to mark the eradication of the Ukrainian force that previously occupied the region. We also know that both sides reported drone and missile exchanges across multiple border regions on May 20th, suggesting that there's a chance that Putin could have been caught up in a drone assault. But beyond this, nothing else is certain. Is the Kremlin lying to project an image of Putin that doesn't really exist? It's possible. Putin has been forced to constantly adapt since what was meant to be a few-day special military operation to take Ukraine has devolved into a war of attrition lasting more than 3 years. He's taken shot after shot to his reputation as Russia's strongman leader and protector, which is damaging his public image. Perhaps faking the news of an assassination attempt is the Kremlin's way of showing that Putin himself is in as much danger as the myriad soldiers he's sending to fight and die in Ukraine. That's the sort of message Putin would like circulating throughout the front line, given his many failures so far. A twisted sort of morale booster, showing his soldiers that they're in this together with Russia's leadership. Equally as possible is that Ukraine attempted an assassination and isn't owning up to it. After all, Ukraine has plenty of history when it comes to knocking off high-priority Russian targets on Russian territory. CIPA highlights this in a May 21st article, noting that Ukraine appears to be following the Mosad Model for assassinations. That model was followed to take out several Nazi officials who were on the verge of escaping justice for their roles in the atrocities committed during World War II, according to Colonel Roman Kostenko, who is a Ukrainian member of parliament. It's a model Ukraine is now following to take out Russian officials. It's a model that seems to be working. General Yaroslav Moskalik was killed by a car bomb in late April, says CIPA. Ukraine took out Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov with a scooter bomb in December. These are just a couple of examples of how Ukraine is reputed to be using car bombs and targeted shootings to wreak havoc within Russia's leadership structure. Might Ukraine have tried to kill Putin on May 20th? It's possible. If it did, and especially if it failed, it's no surprise that Ukraine would want to deny any involvement. It doesn't want to feed into Putin's attempts to cast himself as a hero by confirming that Russia's leader did indeed escape an assassination attempt. Regardless of what happened on May 20th, there have been several results of the attack that both escalate and, in some cases, suggest that Putin is looking for a way out of the Ukraine war. On the getting out front, National Post editor-in-chief Diane Francis spoke to Times Radio on May 27th. During the conversation, she covered the assassination attempt and what it might lead to. He came very close to being assassinated recently by a Ukrainian drone that took down a helicopter in his fleet, Francis claims. He's had very important military brass and other people around him assassinated by Ukrainian special operations. They're all over the place. Francis is implying that the situation for Russia's leader is growing increasingly untenable as Ukraine looks for ways to bring the war Putin started back to roost. And it's not just assassination attempts about which Putin has to worry. They're getting in there, Francis says of Ukraine. They're destroying facilities. They're impeding oil flows. They're doing whatever they can. Therein lies a reason why Putin may now be looking for a way out of the war he started. Putin isn't going to look for an outright exit right away, Francis says, but he'll welcome an exit that gives him some kind of reasonable glory. Times Radio also notes that despite the Russian media's attempts to project what happened in Kursk on May 20th as some sort of victory, what really happened was the dampeners were put on Putin's visit to Kursk. Add this to Putin begging Ukraine for a temporary ceasefire so he could go through with his Victory Day parade celebrations earlier in May, Francis says, and you start getting clear signs that Putin is looking to end the war. The only problem is that the end can only come in a way that makes Putin look good. So Russia's leader is stuck between a rock and a hard place, leaving him with only one option for responding to Ukraine's assassination attempt: more terrorizing of Ukraine's cities. It likely isn't a coincidence that Russia launched its largest drone strike against Ukraine yet, less than a week after Putin's helicopter was allegedly almost taken out in Kursk. On the night of May 25th and into May 26th, Russia bombarded Ukraine with an aerial assault that included a staggering 355 drones, a record-breaking number for a single assault. That strike followed the previous evening when Russia sent 298 drones and 69 missiles Ukraine's way. Between May 23rd and the early hours of May 26th, Russia launched 900 drones. Was this a response to the assassination attempt? It seems possible. The New York Post certainly makes the link, adding that Russia also fired 9 cruise missiles at Ukraine on the same night that it sent 335 drones. The good news from Ukraine's perspective is that all of those missiles, along with 228 of the drones Russia sent, were shot down or otherwise neutralized. However, impacts were reported in 5 Ukrainian regions. Putin may have believed that his only possible response to the assassination attempt was to hit Ukraine harder than he ever had before, but he likely didn't anticipate that his retaliatory strike would set off a chain reaction of events that may have taken him even further away from the Russian-favoring peace that Francis says he's angling to get. In the wake of Russia's terrifying weekend drone bombardment, both the US President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky slammed Putin. Trump was outright furious. Taking to his Truth Social platform, Trump lambasted Putin, claiming that Russia's leader has gone absolutely crazy. Zelensky was no less damning, stating that only a sense of total impunity can allow Russia to carry out such strikes and continue increasing their scale. Zelensky added that this increased volume of strikes should be met with more sanctions from the West in an effort to hinder Putin's war machine. Putin likely isn't too worried about Zelensky's response. In the mind of Russia's leader, he feels justified about sending more drones into Ukraine, given what apparently almost happened to him in Kursk. However, Putin is far more worried about Trump calling him crazy. In the wake of Trump's comments, the Kremlin attempted to pour water over the growing fire. Putin's mouthpiece, Dmitry Peskov, attributed Trump's comments to emotional overload, while noting that the Ukraine war was hitting a pivotal point. "This is a very crucial moment," Peskov said, "which is naturally accompanied by emotional overload on all sides and emotional reactions." Peskov then went on to say that the Kremlin is very grateful to Trump for all of the efforts he's making to encourage peace talks between Russia and Ukraine. That statement of gratitude may reveal more than Putin intends. It could be seen as a desperate effort by Russia to keep the US president on side, at a point where Putin has gone too far in response to the assassination attempt. If Putin is looking for a way out of the fight he started, as Francis claims, these sorts of escalations are clearly not the way he's going to get it. But it gets worse for Putin. As Russia's devastating drone assault on Ukraine was starting to wrap up, news broke that would have sent shivers down Putin's spine. On May 26th, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz announced that 4 nations have removed any restrictions Ukraine previously had on how Ukraine uses Western-supplied long-range missiles against Russia. There are no longer any range restrictions on weapons delivered to Ukraine, neither by the British, nor by the French, not by us, nor by the Americans, Merz announced following the record-breaking Russian drone strike. This means that Ukraine can now defend itself, for example by attacking military positions in Russia, with very few exceptions, It didn't do that until recently. It can now do that, Merz added. This is huge, and the Kremlin knows it. Russia immediately came out to claim that this combined decision by 4 Western nations was dangerous and would be detrimental to any sort of peace agreement. Again, Putin's desire to end the war is showing. His escalation, potentially caused by the assassination attempt, has only led to an escalation from the other side rather than the intended surrender Putin had hoped to achieve. Now Ukraine can hit any targets it wants inside Russia with Storm Shadow, ATACMS, and potentially Germany's Taurus missile. Far from forcing Ukraine to back down, all Putin has achieved is convincing the West to deliver the same kind of firepower to Ukraine that Russia is using to terrorize Ukraine's cities. It all tracks back to May 20th and the supposed assassination attempt. Though that assassination failed, it sparked a series of events that ultimately placed Ukraine in a better position than it was before Putin visited Kursk. Russia's leader now faces a massive dilemma. Does he keep escalating his attacks against Ukraine? He could, but that could only lead to further escalations from Ukraine in the West. Bear in mind that Ukraine having permission to use long-range missiles inside Russia places Putin at further risk. Another visit to Kursk is out of the question. Putin may have survived a drone attack on his helicopter, but he wouldn't be able to do much about a missile touching down during one of his visits. Or does Putin try to push for peace, as Francis says he wants to? If he does, he'd be doing it with less leverage than he had before the assassination attempt. Trump is now furious with Russia's leader, going so far as to call him crazy. Ukraine has access to and the ability to use long-range missiles that put Russia in deeper trouble than it's been at any other point during Putin's invasion. Breaking the news of the assassination attempt was a way to cast Putin as a hero to his own people. It, along with Russia's response, has come at the cost of weakening Russia's hand in peace negotiations. Putin is further away from getting what he wants out of Ukraine no matter which of these choices he makes. And it all stems from Ukraine allegedly attempting to assassinate Putin, as Russia's leader stroked his ego by visiting an area of his country that he should have known wasn't safe. There is a third option. However, it's one that is entirely out of Putin's control. Ukraine could keep trying to assassinate Russia's leader, and now that Ukraine has long-range missiles, there's a higher chance that it could succeed. If Ukraine takes that option and somehow manages to kill Putin, that leaves us with an interesting question to ponder. What happens next? It's a question that is clearly already on Putin's mind if recent reports are to be believed. On May 4th, the Kyiv Independent reported on the publication of a new documentary named Russia, Kremlin, Putin, 25 Years, released by Russia to mark the 25th anniversary of Putin's rule. Even though Putin spent some of those years not as president, but as the man behind the scenes controlling the president, the documentary revealed that Putin is engaged in a constant search for his successor. Yes, I do, Putin responded, when asked by the documentary crew about whether he assesses the potential of each of his possible successors. Putin says that whoever follows him would have to earn the trust of the people, and that any future president who fails in this take has no chance to do anything seriously. There should be a person, and preferably several, so that people have a choice, who could achieve this trust from the citizens of the country. The mentions of preferably several are ironic coming from a man who has held the seat of Russian power in a death grip for a quarter of a century. Still, the remark reveals what Putin likely already knows should Ukraine succeed in any future assassination attempt. Putin's departure would leave behind a massive power vacuum in Russia, and that vacuum could consume the entire country long before it wins the Ukraine war. Sure, there are people in contention for Russia's leadership if Putin is killed. Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin is one of them, as is Moscow's mayor Sergei Sobyanin, former Russian president and Putin lackey Dmitry Medvedev, and several others. But a choice hasn't been made yet. And the far more likely outcome of Putin being assassinated is that a power struggle would emerge between Russia's other ruling elites. That's according to RBC Ukraine, which spoke to Russian political analyst Ivan Preobrazhensky back in September 2024. He says that there's a 70% probability that a handover of power to a Putin-selected successor or otherwise would fail, leading to clashes between existing clans all attempting to seize power. The key question for Ukraine is, could those clashes bring about an end to the Russian invasion? It's possible, though even that end would be in doubt. They won't pay any reparations, Preobrazhensky says, of what might happen if Putin is killed and somebody else took over. They might symbolically hand over one oligarch to a Western court, as Serbia did after Milosevic. True democracy would also be unlikely to arrive in Russia following Putin's death, he says, meaning there's always a chance that somebody who is even more power-hungry than Putin could scrap their way to the Russian presidency. Whoever does succeed Putin would take control over a Russia that's in a terrible state. Mired in its war with Ukraine, Russia is creaking under the weight of Western sanctions and an economic downturn that is sure to hit home hard when the war ends. Inflation is hovering around the 9% mark, and Russia's base interest rate is 21%. Whoever assumes the reins of power after Putin will have plenty of internal strife to handle, along with being forced to decide whether to continue the former leader's supposed special military operation in Ukraine. Still, these are all questions that can only be answered after Putin is gone. Right now, all we know is that Ukraine may have attempted to assassinate Putin, with that event sparking a chain reaction that has escalated the Ukraine war beyond any point it's been in the past. Maybe that's what Ukraine wanted, or it might be seriously trying to take out Putin, rather than negotiate with him, because it believes that Russia losing its leader would plunge the country into such massive domestic chaos that the war has to end. One thing is for certain, Putin has a lot to think about following this attempt on his life. Maybe that fact alone could push Russia's leader into compromising on a peace deal in the future. But what do you think about Ukraine's attempt to assassinate Putin? Did it really happen? And if it did, do you think it was a deliberate assassination attempt, or was Putin simply caught in the crossfire within a still active war zone? What happens if Putin is killed? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and remember to subscribe to The Military Show for more videos covering the latest developments in the Ukraine war.